6 by Clive Jordan. So Clive is actually the CEO of the LOD Planner. Clive was even a part of the team that founded the Vico Software, created the world's first fully integrated. Over his 20 years BIM journey, Clive has interned as an architect, earned a first-class civil engineering master's degree, got his boots dirty for 6 years as a contractor, spent a lot of time in the BIM industry, and his area of expertise is mostly into making the BIM execution plans and the LOD. So I would like to welcome Clive Jordan, the CEO and founder of the LOD Planner. Yes, Clive.
Thank you, Adnan, for the introduction. Today we're going to talk about BIM management made simple. At our team, we have a motto. It's Smart Lean BIM. And we even wear it on the backs of our shirts. And that is our reminder that if you do BIM in the wrong way, it is not good for the project and it can be more money. And so we coined this term, the right BIM at the right time, by the right people, but specifically for the right reasons. So always know why you're going to do BIM. Otherwise, what's the point? Otherwise, it might be wasteful. Otherwise, somebody might not use it later on down the line. So that's our key motto. Today, we're going to go through, and we had the poll, we're going to go through a bit of why BIM management and why BIM. And then we'll look at BIM execution planning, and we'll look at why you create a BIM execution plan to get everybody on board and to agree on process. And then we'll talk about the scoping workflow and understanding how you define in a 3D model, when is it important to do certain things, who is responsible for it, what detail, what geometry, what information, how accurate it is, all of those really important things that you need to define so that you can agree across different companies where and how that model is going to be created. And then the third one is really important because if you even just have a great plan, if you can't execute on that plan, if you can't actually run a timeline, a schedule, a program of all of those events and get things completed, then there was no good in having the plan in the first place. So we'll cover those three things. Adnan, anything to add? Anything that you want to share with the group before we?
Yeah, sure. After the session, we'll take the question and answers. So any of the people who have the question can ask directly to the Clive. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'll have 3 resources at the end as well, some links to go to read some more and to improve your BIM skills to that top level. So yeah, I'll share those links as well via the WhatsApp. Cool. So let's get started. First of all, I know that you have been on a journey of learning about BIM, and BIM can be many things. So you've learned about how, I'm sure, to create models in different tools and the purposes of that. I know that a few of my friends have been presenting, and some of it about generative design, some of it about really, really cool things to create models. And those models that are created can be used for many, many different things. Here we see a few of them. You might create it for visualization, for some kind of analysis or some kind of clash or quantification. You might use it to walk the owner through the building. You might use it for the owner to manage and maintain the building. Or you might just use it as a pretty picture to be able to render and share that with others to see what the building is going to look like before you build it. So there's a lot of uses for models. But we ask ourselves, what is BIM? Is this BIM? Adnan, is this BIM? Maybe.
Exactly. It's actually just a model.
It's just a model. So this model, is it the model that we asked for? Is it the model that's going to be useful? Can that model fulfill the uses or the BIM uses or the model uses that we were planning for? I don't know, but then let's take a step forward. Is this one BIM? So was the first one, was that BIM? Or is this BIM? It's a model, it's just a model. Yeah. But it might be the one that people would like. So would we like more elements? If this isn't BIM, what about this? And really all we're doing is putting more and more elements into the building. They're all great models and they could be used for one of those different purposes. And it's really important to define that, because if you created the model on the right-hand side and you actually only needed the model on the left-hand side, you would have spent too much money and too much time. And nobody's going to be happy about that. So we have to agree on what BIM should be before we go and spend a lot of time doing it. Because in our industry, we're trying to save money by using this new method of creating better outputs and being more efficient. And having a good communication can avoid these costly miscommunication and misalignments that can cost a lot of money in the industry. So in our tool set as a BIM manager, I'm sure you've heard a lot about all of these tools, the authoring, analysis, and use tools, and they are fantastic. They are really, really great tools, but our industry has neglected planning for these tools, for this workflow and understanding. And in our industry, we've currently used project management tools that are generally inefficient and disconnected. And one of the things that we do at LOD Planner is make that highly efficient and much more connected to the workflow. So I can talk and walk through these. I'm not going to focus too much on the tools specifically, but what we really need is a dedicated workflow to help BIM managers to become more efficient. And so the three modules that you can get access to for free, and this is the advert for LOD Planner: Plan, Scope, and Flow. Plan, Scope, and Track. We updated the module. Tracking and controlling is the third module. So the plan, BIM execution plans, we'll talk in depth about these, but being able to create something from templates to communicate with the team exactly what the workflows are going to be. How are you going to run coordination? Who is going to be involved in the decision making about BIM uses? Who is going to be part of the team and what are their roles going to be? There's a lot of really, really important information that needs to be captured in a BIM execution plan. The scoping is all about understanding who needs to do what at what point in time and agreeing on that, the who, the what, the when, and the why in a visual way. And then the tracking is about controlling the tasks that you've just created. So let's take a very quick look at what I'm talking about. And in this workflow, and I promise the advert for the tool will be out of the way soon, but being able to use templates to drag and drop and create your BIM execution plan makes it so much easier for those teams that are having to create these all of the time. You can review and agree and approve these between your teams. And then in a simple visual way, you can use the scoping grid, again, to drag and drop the information that you need, the elements that you need, apply the information requirements that are needed for the owner and for other parties, and understand the development as that model progresses from estimate use to coordination to documentation, and being able to output that into a rich contract and an agreement. So a lot of services providers are providing this as a method to create a contract. And then tracking and controlling these is imperative to be able to get that done and get that shared with everyone else. So that workflow of managing who does what when and getting it to completion is really, really what we focus on, and making that a simple workflow. So let's talk about BIM execution plans. Adnan,
another session was by Ashwini Kumar Jha, in which he has discovered the BIM execution plans. Yeah.
And this is one of the most important documents in a project. It is a government mandate as part of the workflow in the UK. There is a workflow that is around the world adopting and adapting a need for a BIM execution plan or a project execution plan, or what we used to call it when I was an owner was a project implementation plan. they're all about how to define the structure for the project. And it needs to be something that is agreed on by all parties in order for you to get started on the right foot. Otherwise, BIM can be sometimes pretty difficult without one and without those agreements. But at the moment, if you are looking in the industry to solve this challenge, there are lots of teams trying to create workflows around a contract produced in a word processing and then sent as a PDF on an email. And what we have found is that not all teams can understand what it is they need to do and when they need to do it, and everything gets bottlenecked, everything gets stored up into a PDF. And so, unfortunately, a lot of the time, when you create, and as a BIM manager, you spend a lot of time creating a BIM execution plan, they end up in the bottom drawer and they don't get used. And so when you as a BIM manager, you try and create a BIM execution plan and then everyone ignores it and everyone throws it away or puts it in the bottom drawer and doesn't use it, it's almost not worth doing it in the first place. So that is a real challenge. That's a real problem, and we would really love to try and solve that. And that's something that we can talk about in a lot more detail through the question and answer session as well. So all about how to make sure that that doesn't happen. So the second part that we're talking about is scoping. And how do you agree on, remember the three models that we had on the screen? How do we agree on which model that we should be achieving? Which one is the right model to be using? We looked at the one on the left-hand side all the way through to the one on the right-hand side. And then somewhere in between might be the right model that we need. But how do we define all of the things that we need? There are many, many different parts to the model. As Adnan says, was the first one a BIM? Did it have the right geometry? Did it have the geometry at the level of reliability? Was it at the right level of accuracy? Do we have the right information attached to it? And what was the real purpose behind creating it in the first place? So all of these different parts of that workflow and all of those different parts of the purpose of creating a model need to be defined. And it's really pretty difficult. As a BIM manager, this is your job though. Your job is to, first of all, define all of these for the whole of the scope of the project. And then it's to manage, track, and control them so that they get delivered at the right time by the right person. And it's pretty tough. It's really tough. And unfortunately, what happens is if you haven't got those things in place, we end up having missing BIM, where sometimes you are halfway through a project and you realize that nobody modeled the light fitting. Or you end up with too much BIM, and it could be that you have 7 different people that modeled the light fitting. It might be the architect modeled it early on, the owner had their own object that they wanted to use, maybe the interior designer also modeled it, maybe the electrical engineer, and maybe the contractor. They all created a light fixture, and that's too much BIM. So you can go from either end, where you either have not enough, where you missed scope and you have scope gaps in the model, or you can go all the way to the other side and have more than one person doing the same thing, which is waste. So the third part that we wanted to focus on was about being able to track and control those things. So once you've created that nice scope that understands exactly who does what at what point in time, how much detail, how much geometry, how much information, how accurate, you then need to be able to track and control those things. And as you track and control it, you might find yourself spending time in long and challenging coordination meetings as a BIM manager. And the raise of hands, the virtual raise of hands, I'm sure that nobody will put their hand up saying that they enjoy spending 3 hours in a coordination meeting. So we see people that resolve those challenges by routing around other elements. So if there was a clash and the pipe had to route around, we've covered BIM execution planning, all about process. We've covered scoping, all about who does what when. But the clash avoidance part is about getting it done and achieving the right sequence of events. So one of the things as a BIM manager you have to think about is the system priority structure. How are you going to make sure that the right things get fixed in the model first, and then later on down the line, you're going to make sure that the other things that are more flexible or less costly to move around others are later in that hierarchy. So if you run this system priority structure, you'll see that the one on the left-hand side that was solving that problem, that clash, it achieved the result of 0 clashes, but it didn't achieve the most efficient output for the modeling, for the project. So the correct priority was that the pipe had priority and the cable tray was routed around it. And as a BIM manager, you have to manage these teams that are creating models so that we can get the right outcome, and the solution is to be early and sequence and allow teams to know that that's going to be the case, so that the pipe will take priority and will have a better outcome as a result. We actually had a case study where we had 2 teams, Team A and Team B. They went through a couple of different scenarios, and it was to test this theory of system priority. So prioritizing certain things as a foundation before putting in others. And the results were pretty astounding. When you ran that process of clash avoidance and the sequencing beforehand and having a very tactile session between the teams, we saw a 73% reduction in issues. Issues meaning clashes, problems that came up that could cause issues that were not necessarily clashes, but really required more time from the team to solve. And that was an amazing, amazing case study where we had 2 teams that were willing to spend their time and running this analysis, and they actually got to swap. So we had both teams do both of the different methods, and that is the average of those results. What we saw as a result was moving away from the traditional, very long phase-based design process to a smaller bite-sized set of milestones, starting the right trades at the right time and allowing them to have conversations to make sure that they can prioritize systems and run clash avoidance. And if we look at each one of these milestones, we have to define the purpose. We have to define why we are doing it. And as a BIM manager, we would be going through building that scope and understanding what those milestones were, whether they were design review type milestones, or am I building this model for a cost estimate? Am I building it for coordination, for handover? And then I'll build the scope that's required for the project as a whole. And I'll start to complete the grid to understand what elements I'm going to need for that purpose, for that item. So here for the cost estimation milestone, there'll be certain elements that are required for the ability to create a cost. And then for handover, we might need more or less elements. For coordination, we might need more or less elements. So being able to define that in a way that's really granular enough for teams to manage and control is incredibly important. But then, as I mentioned, to achieve this avoidance process, the clash avoidance process, it's all about sequencing those elements. So the best way to have feedback is when you're in person. We have video, which is great, but when you have somebody right next to you and you can have a conversation and you can achieve an understanding of, I need to put my ceiling in before you fix your light fixture at that elevation. Otherwise, if I put my ceiling in afterwards, you'll have to move your light fixture. So therefore, the sequence of those events is incredibly important. So we create these cards, we chop them up, we have these sessions where we start to, on either the construction site or in the office, sequence and do something called pull planning, a lot more detail on pull planning, and I'm sure can be in other webinars as well. We also have webinars on pull planning, but understanding that sequence so that somebody doesn't create something in the model too early or too late. And that is an important part of that BIM management process. And so what we end up with is a sequence of events, and then we can start to schedule those out and understand how long the phase or that stage is going to take, and be able to really get the best out of our coordination process. So we like to make it easy and call them three things: the planning, the scoping, and then the tracking. But it's really about that BIM management role and making sure that you have a simple communication with the team on what the processes are, who actually is going to do what when, and then be able to sequence things so that you can run a clash avoidance workflow rather than a clash detection workflow. I promised some resources, and I promised some time for talking as well. So I want to pause there, Adnan, and just share 3 resources, and I can share those links with the people on the channel. But maybe we could open for some questions, and then I can close when we dry up.
Sure, we can take up the questions. Actually, the very first question will be, I need to ask you. So there's a first question I have, like, how do we extract the employer information requirement? Like, how do we make an employer information requirement in the BIM execution plans? Can you brief me about it?
Yes, absolutely. So when you have an employer that is interested in BIM, usually they fall one or side or the other side. They're either already supported by a consultant that is helping them to define their requirements, or they think they know BIM, or they know they want BIM, but they're not really sure about what BIM is. And so trying to help both of them, it's slightly different. On the consultant supported, it's about getting into the details and making sure that workflows and processes are in place, and you've gone through your plain language questions, or they have, and you have a solid plan. On the other side, it's about helping that owner have the first and best experience possible with BIM. And instead of saying, yes, we'll do BIM, and then not defining it, or instead of saying, yes, we'll do BIM, and defining it in every single part of that shopping list that they check everything off, you need to help them focus on 1 or 2 BIM uses that are specifically very useful for them, and help them to define what's required for them to be successful. Because in our industry, we're so attached and so connected with the technology, and we're so happy that we're just going to create these great models that, unfortunately, a lot of the time in industry, you might have an employer that has employers' information requirements that are unfortunately bloated, meaning that they have a lot of things that they don't even need in there, or that they were copied and pasted from somebody else. And it's your role as the BIM manager to make sure that those requirements are actually something that they're going to have a customer, that somebody is going to use your output. Because it might be that you get that one project, and it might be that you work with the owner on that one project, but they'll be disappointed because they'll have spent too much money, they won't have a great output, and they won't want to do BIM on their next project. So hopefully that answers somewhat, but the workflow should be: use your set of plain language questions to get the requirements from that owner, and depending on how much detail they want to go into, you can, or it's up to you whether you would go into that detail. For us, we actually have customers of ours that sit down with the owner, and they go down that scope grid and visually click, would you like this, or would you not like this? So these light fittings, would you like these in the model, in the handover model? Would you like them to be at a certain level of accuracy? Would you like them to be within this tolerance? Would you like information about it? Would you like to have the warranty? Would you like to have the duration of the warranty, the person to call, how much detail? Because there's thousands of parameters that we could attach. But actually, in my experience as an owner and working with a lot of other owners, there's probably less than 20 different parameters that they are interested in when it comes to a handover. So I could talk about this all day, but hopefully that answers some part of your question. If not, then let's unpack it some more.
Sure. Like there's one more add-on to it. Like, is there any template to have the employee information requirement, or like we can find it in the like ISO 19650 or the PAS? So what is the document that we use to refer to take up the EIR from the clients?
So there are templates as far as, you mean just creating an EIR? It does depend on what is included. Sometimes that could just be some text. Sometimes it could include all of the appendices and tables that are documenting, for example, what your model information delivery plan. It depends on how detailed that owner is, so it's always going to be different. But our recommendation is to create a scope that the owner can understand.
Okay, so let's now we take a question from all the participants. I can read out one question for you, Clive.
Yeah.
Like there's one question from Loganathan. He wants to ask like how to extract the zoning wise schedule for fire protection system.
The zoning wise schedules. So are we talking about the data from a 3D model to create a schedule in Revit, or are we talking about a timeline for the fire protection tasks?
Yes, Loganathan, I have unmuted you. You can unmute yourself. We can take up another question, Clive. It's by Mohammed Ikram Ali. He wants to ask, like, you want to say the sequence of modeling should be planned ahead to avoid clashes to certain extent, but there are certain elements which are common for different stakeholders involved. Like, what is actually the question, Ikram, you wants to ask to Clive?
So I'm trying to understand the question. So yes, there are many stakeholders that actually unmute themselves. It says talking permitted on there. So you want to say the sequencing of models should be planned ahead to avoid clashes? Yes, to a certain extent, but there are certain elements which are common for different stakeholders involved. So when there's a model element that changes responsibility, so we talked about that light fixture, for example, where you've got it early on, it might be the architect that is responsible for it, and then later it might be the electrical engineer, and then later on it might be the contractor. So planning that model handover, the element level, is really important as well. Different stages, they will be owned by different parties, and it might be okay just to throw that element in and not worry about clashes and coordination early on. It might be okay to do that as long as the purpose of the model is not for coordination, is not for documentation. It might be that you just need a count of those fixtures for the estimate, for example. And it's okay that they're not in exactly the right position. If that's not the purpose, don't spend more time than necessary to coordinate something if the purpose of that model at that stage is not to be coordinated. So yeah, I agree that you should try and plan ahead and try and avoid those. But when there's a handoff between different parties, it's
sure. Matsnoor, he wants to ask, how can we convince the employer so that he will get benefits from using BIM?
Interesting. What a great question. How do we convince an owner to do BIM? And I realized a lot of things in when I was an owner. And so I've had the fortunate experience to be an architect for a short time, an owner, an engineer, a contractor, and also a service provider and a software vendor twice. So I've had those different, and one of the things I realized across our industry is that we as BIM people see there's so much potential for an owner from a 3D model, but there's such a disconnect between that and the capability of an owner to consume the model. And it's a really interesting time for us because there's a gap that is being filled by better and more simple technology. So creating, but you have to help an owner understand, and I talked about this just previously, where if you try and do everything and you try and say to an owner, this is what BIM could do, and there's 50 different things, and you try and do this, there's no way that the owner is going to be able to use that and achieve it. So my recommendation is always focus on the 1 or 2 simple BIM uses that for that one project, for that one owner, and help them knock that one way out of the park. Yeah, let's hit that for 6, and let's make sure that we're able to convince the owner that maybe we can add another one the next time. So it's smaller, bite-sized BIM pieces rather than something that's going to try to blow their mind, but unfortunately it just means that it's unusable. Does that make sense? How to convince the owner that they need BIM? That's a great question. Bite-sized chunks.
So there's one more question from Debindu Biswas, who is an on-site BIM coordinator, and he's working in India as of now. So his question is, there are already too many BIM execution plans in the market. How can a BIM manager stick to it and maintain till the end phase of the project?
So when you say too many BIM execution plans, as in too many versions on a project, or too many different templates, or what's the...
I think he would like to say, like, there are too many templates for the BIM execution plan. Like, how do we stick to one, and which is the one template that we should trust on?
Yeah, and I think that the point to a BIM execution plan is not to just fill in a template. We have users that they have a flexible template that they use some parts for some projects. If they have a very, if they've got a team that's just starting to do BIM on their project, then they would actually say, we are going to put more of the training sections into our BIM execution plan with videos explaining this workflow, because we've got new people that don't know how to do it. So instead of this being a BIM execution plan that forces people to do certain things in a certain way, it actually helps them to do that. And so their BIM execution plan is different depending on the different teams that are working on each of those projects. So I get that it might be a challenge to have lots of different types of templates, but the purpose is, if you think about the purpose of a BIM execution plan, is to help the teams to achieve whatever those BIM uses are that you've set out to do. And in order to do that, for different teams, there are different things that are valuable. So yeah, one of our customers actually likes the fact that you can just drag and drop different sections to the top to make them more pertinent, to make them more powerful for those teams. But to keep a master of all of those different templates in the one place, and that's what LOD Planner is really good for. You can keep your templates, and you can just drag and drop what you need for that one project that you're working on.
Right. So absolutely. He also agreed with your point. He just texted. There's one more question from Saeed Muhammad Nadeem. He's working as a BIM manager, and he's from Hyderabad. He wants to ask, like, in most of the project, BIM is actually introduced in the middle of the project or after the project gets completed. So then how should we manage the project and make it successful? Like, I think he wants to ask, like, most of the projects, the consultants used to have the design in the form of CAD drawings, and then they start the projects, and in the middle of the projects, there's another BIM company comes in and tell the client or the owner that we will implement BIM. Now what we need to do at this stage? That's his question.
So I would again say why. I'd ask the question why, and it's so. I mean, it's funny how I think that the answer to most of the questions that we talk about, it comes back to why are we doing BIM? And unfortunately, the answer of that question is usually uncertain. It's just because BIM is the obvious way to go. Yeah, there's no like, why would we not do BIM? That's really the question. But when we're doing BIM, why are we doing BIM? So what is the purpose? What are the use cases? Why am I On the BIM dictionary, there's a fantastic list of over 70 different model uses. I would grab that list and I would go through that list and I would ask them, what is important? Are we doing BIM for testing generative design? Or are we doing BIM for model handover? Or are we doing BIM because the owner wants to sell more units to a different country so that they can give them an experience in a VR world? And all of those are great reasons to do BIM, but they're a reason, they're a purpose. That is a specific use case. And if we don't define that, then the project is not going to be successful because it hasn't got a goal. So the question was really about how do we have successful BIM when it comes in middle of the project? It is incredibly tough, but that's where to start, is to ask that question and to go through the BIM uses and to start putting a plan around those BIM uses. So you start tracking and managing, controlling the scope of the model that's important to meet that BIM use, not a whole bunch of things that aren't going to be used by anybody else. Hopefully that helps. That's why we've developed LOD Planner, is to take the best out of the word processing documents and the spreadsheets and make it into one platform so that it's easier for you to do that. And when so you mentioned that you're managing that internally. We have a lot of teams that are managing their own standards and creating what they do so that they protect themselves against risk when they are contracting with others as well. So there's a very clear scope when you can create it and visualize it and print it and then distribute clear difference. It wasn't part of this scope. It's amazing how the visual scoping inside of LOD Planner is so powerful, because you can't, it's like, this is what we agreed to, and I can see it. I can see the objects, all of these different elements that I've created, that's written. It's very difficult for other people to understand what those things are. So my recommendation is to use it for yourselves in a cohesive way that you can invite all of your teams to and understand what you're contracting with other parties for, and help them understand it so that you can have a good contract, a good agreement with the other teams.
Right. So is there any way, like any company uses the LOD Planner platform, is there any way that these companies make the families or the model elements, they can also contribute to the LOD Planner? Is there any platform that you have made?
Yeah, we do. So there's a couple of different ways. One is through the in-app chat, that we have companies that request other stuff, but we've actually just implemented a way of creating your own custom content. And there's a pretty cool way of analyzing your uploaded, at the moment it's uploaded images, but we will be able to upload elements and other things in the future, which is kind of a cool part of the rest of the workflow that we're connecting. But the upload of an image, it actually uses artificial intelligence to object identify and then crop that object out of a certain image as well. So there's some quite fun and powerful tools that are embedded in there as well when you start creating custom content.
Can you brief me about it?
Yeah, it's free to join, and you can jump on and try it for free, and you get one project. You can invite 5 viewers, 5 team members to it to view it, and you can edit a certain amount of the plan and a certain amount of the scope, so that you can understand and start building something that will work for you. And then there are paid versions that start at $29 per month, but there are team versions or there are company plans that are much more feature rich and also much less costly, and you know, it's a yearly subscription that you would pay for your company.
Got it. So if there's a company who is already using the BIM 360 platform for the field version and for the build version and also the documents management module, right? Mm-hmm. So what is the add-on that LOD Planner brings in for the BIM 360? If they are already paying for the BIM 360, what is exactly how LOD Planner is differing from BIM 360, or how LOD Planner will be helpful in the project with respect to the BIM 360 platform? Yeah. So
Autodesk has a lot of tools that are in different silos, and BIM 360 helps to connect the outputs of all of those. LOD Planner is the framework that helps you plan what should go into all of those different tools so that you can make sure that it comes out. So if you think about that as the framework, there's tools that create in different silos. BIM 360 is the Autodesk equivalent of tying some of those things together. But the planning side of things is who does what, at what point in time, how are they going to do it, contractual language around it, which standards you're going to follow. That's all that goes into LOD Planner. And look out for some interesting movements and integrations from us in the future as well.
That's great. So do we have one integration with the BIM 360 platform as well?
I can't make any comments at the moment.
Okay, fine. So it's a secret. I want to understand, like, there are two kinds of workflow that I usually understand and most of the people in the BIM industry are using. There are two approaches towards BIM. One is the CAD to BIM approach, or the CAD to design to CAD approach, right? In where the design consultant used to prepare the CAD drawings, and there's a BIM company who used to model the elements over those CAD drawings. And another approach is where the design consultants itself, they use the BIM modeling tools, making CAD drawings, they make the model itself, and then from the model they extract the drawings. So I want to ask, like, what is exactly the right way of doing the BIM implementation on any given project? The first one or the second one?
Definitely start with hand drawings. Definitely start with thoughts and sketches at the very early stage. You know, the sitting in the coffee shop with a napkin sketch. But get to BIM as soon as possible, way before you think about creating any drawings from as an output. The concept of when does BIM come? Does BIM come, does 2D come first and then 3D, or is it 3D and then 2D? It always has to be 3D first if you want to get the efficiencies from BIM. Because once you've created a 3D model, I just slice through that 3D model and I've got my drawings. So I would be crazy to do it the other way around. However, our industry is a traditional industry. There are millions of people around the world that are already capable of creating really fantastic designs and buildings using a 2D approach. So everyone in our industry is used to doing that in a 2D world. So what we will see is, as you mentioned, and one of the questions as well said, BIM is coming in at a later stage throughout the project, but it hopefully will be earlier and earlier and earlier, and in some projects right at the beginning, and that will be a transformation that occurs over a number of years and is continuing to occur. I actually heard a lot of people say, in 5 years, everyone will be doing BIM. There will be no 2D drawings. And it just keeps on being like, it feels like, oh, is that 5 years away from now? Is it 5 years away from, and it just keeps on moving. Our industry is so slow, but there is a rapid transformation occurring with technology being much, much better, continuing to iterate, and the pace of that change is increasing. It is getting to be very exciting. And the better the technology is, and the better that we can, the more simple that workflow can be, then that's more powerful for users to do that and to choose that rather than to do it the hard way and the wasteful way. So I completely understand the question, and it's a challenge that we will overcome together, and one that you are really helping our industry with, and I must thank you for that. It's amazing what you're doing and helping teams to really get into this space, because this is the future. This is the way that we should and we are building our virtual and our real worlds through that. And the line broke up. Maybe could you just repeat that? I heard what information, something related to Kobe as well. Kobe is a... Sorry? I missed that. Let me try and answer what I think I heard. Kobe is a framework. It's a schema. It's the directions to, it's how you transfer information. It doesn't define what that information should be and who should be responsible, when they should do it, and all of those things. Those parts are what you would define in something like LOD Planner, and you would then transfer using the COBie schema that data to another party or another system. So COBie is it's like the common format for. I'll say thank you. If you have more questions, please type them in. I was actually presenting inside of LOD Planner, so just kind of fun that I had my presentation in one of our plan sections, and this is being able to embed things into LOD Planner as well, which is pretty cool, pretty fun. Just another thing. And then I mentioned about these different resources. I'll put links in, but there's a whole bunch of really good resources, ranging from what is BIM to a full list of software that's available. And then the ones that I recommended were the planning and then the Evil BIM. So I'll put these 3 links into. I can see one there. So our companies in Germany, Nordics, implementing LOD Planner. Yeah, we do, and we also have some local support there as well. So if you're interested and you need some support, just connect with us and we'll put you in touch with those teams there. If you're interested as well in getting more tightly involved with the team, then also let us know. We have a partner program that you can find out more about at the bottom of our website as well. So if you go to our partner program, you'll also see more information about that. So depending on what type of relationship you're looking for in Germany and the Nordics. There's some more webinars coming up as well that might be useful. So about tracking progress. So we track progress of the schedule at the moment, not of the, so it is used on construction projects as well for tracking of the tasks for construction, but for the construction team on site. Could you clarify that? Construction. Okay, so people do use it for the construction workflow, but it's more used, I would say, a majority are using it for tracking and controlling the design. On the construction side, there are some people using it for pull planning and managing of the construction tasks, and that's done in the Kanban board. So maybe I can just show you quickly in here. So when we're in and we can start tracking, and then on those tasks, so you can see all of these tasks are in here, and they have certain date ranges that you can pick to say when they're going to be done. But then you can also, in the card mode, come in here and say, I want to filter just for, I don't know whether there's only, there we go. So just for the architect's task or just for the contractor's task, let's do that. And then here, these are the construction tasks that you can say which ones are in progress and which ones are ready for review. And then we can add more of those statuses in here if we wanted to, and then archive the tasks. So it's really about updating progress and updating statuses as completion occurs. Hopefully, maybe that makes sense and maybe it helps, but there are a lot of other tools that can be incorporated and work with LOD Planner and BIM when it comes to 3D management and 3D design. I think we've lost Adnan again. Any other questions before we move on? There are questions in the Q&A in here as well. Maybe I've completely missed those. How do I get to those? For everyone, and if you have questions, please, good rest of your evening, and I look forward to time.